Thank you. Thank you for joining all of us here today. As many of you know, I am the granddaughter of a Mexican immigrant who came to America in search of a better life for himself and his family. If it wasn't for my grandfather's hard work and the opportunities this country offered him, I would not be serving the great state of Nevada as a U.S. Senator or serving as the first Latina ever in this nation's history. That is why President Trump and his administration's divisive anti-American, anti-immigrant actions are especially offensive to me, because they are hurting the hardworking immigrant families like mine who came to this country in search of a better life. Every new generation of immigrants further enriches the fabric and culture of our nation, and without them, this country would not be what it is today. We need to honor our history as a nation of immigrants and work to reform our immigration system. Experts across the ideological spectrum agree. Immigration reform will grow our economy, making our country stronger. Just this week, Janet Yellen, chairwoman of the Federal Reserve System, said that, and I quote, "Immigration is an important part of U.S. labor force growth, and a radical change to immigration would certainly affect the economy's potential growth." She also said, quote, that slowing the pace of immigration probably would slow the growth rate of the economy. Studies have shown that if we bring undocumented workers out of the shadows and put them on a pathway to citizenship, we would reduce the deficit by almost $1 trillion and increase our GDP by $832 billion. We would see incomes rise for American families by $470 billion and add hundreds of thousands of jobs. In contrast, a policy of mass deportation, which is exactly what this order calls for, would immediately reduce our nation's cumulative GDP over 10 years by $4.7 trillion. Removing all undocumented workers from my home state of Nevada would cost us $9.7 billion in economic activity, $4.3 billion in gross state product, and millions in tax revenue. That is millions that could be used to fix our roads, repair our schools, or care for our veterans. We would lose over 45,000 jobs. The extraordinary contributions of immigrants are especially evident today as workers and businesses across the country participate today in a day without immigrants, demonstrating how essential our immigrant workers and communities are to our society and economy. In Nevada, dozens of big businesses like Mariana's Supermarket have closed their doors for the day in solidarity with our immigrant communities and show the extreme damage President Trump's orders and anti-immigrant agenda would have on our country. The Trump administration blatantly ignores the indisputable benefits of immigration reform, instead demonizing and threatening our immigrant families and communities. Millions of hardworking families who are Americans in all but paper are now living in constant fear of being torn away from their families and forced out of the only country that they know and love. The President's executive order sends a clear message to our immigrant communities. You are targets for deportation, even if you have a clean record, even if you have children who are U.S. citizens, even if you have been living, working, and contributing to this country for years. The Trump administration is setting forth an unprecedented deportation machine, one that acts indiscriminately without regard to the core American values of fairness, equality, and inclusiveness. We saw it in operation just last week, where ICE conducted raids across the country, sweeping up and arresting many who had no criminal records at all. This approach is wrong and immoral. Instead of working together, they're provoking fear and hate, and we should be working together to find a permanent solution to our immigration problems, not calling for mass deportations that will tear our families apart and devastate our economy. That's why my colleagues and I today are introducing a bill to rescind this order. We will not allow the administration's hateful, divisive, anti-immigration agenda to go unopposed. And while I wish this did not have to be the result of such an egregious executive order, I'm proud to have my first bill as a United States Senator focus on protecting the rights and safety of immigrant communities that make Nevada and this country so great. We must continue to work for an America that is inclusive and welcoming to all, not one that divides us and takes us backwards. And that means continuing to stand up and fight against President Trump's anti-immigrant agenda. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Senator Durbin, a fearless and tireless fighter for immigrant families.
Senator Cortez Masto, thank you for joining us in the Senate. You're an important and strong voice on this critical issue, and I'm honored to be co-sponsoring your first piece of legislation before the United States Senate. This is day 28 of the Trump presidency. Do you remember 2 weeks ago when we gathered at airports protesting an executive order that was excluding refugees and immigrants to the United States from 7 Muslim countries? The stories came out, personal stories, real stories, about hardship and deprivation. By the hundreds, we learned of passengers stranded overseas, unable to travel from the United States, denied entry into this country after waiting, some in cases, for years for a chance to come here for the safety of this country. That was the Trump executive order, which led to a massive response by the federal courts. No other president in history, in his first 4 weeks in office, can point to this record where not one, not two, but 3 different federal courts struck down and stayed that executive order, which hurt hundreds of people. What has gone overlooked until this moment is another executive order on interior enforcement, not just those who would immigrate to and from the United States, but the enforcement of immigration laws in the United States. And I want to salute my colleagues, Senator Cortez Masto and Senator Hirono, for joining me in making sure that America is well aware of the other Trump executive order, which threatens not hundreds, but millions. I do not exaggerate, threatens millions who are currently living in the United States with no threat to our country, no criminal record, with strong families, and with a real commitment to this nation and its future. You see, this new Trump order makes up to 8 million immigrants priorities for deportation. It seeks to create a mass deportation force by tripling the number of immigration agents, and it aims to deprive critics of billions of dollars in critical federal funding if they refuse to take part in this mass deportation scheme. The definition of criminal under the new Trump executive order is so inclusive that virtually anyone who came into the United States without legal permission is already a potential criminal subject to deportation. We've seen in just the last few days and weeks, as these orders have been enforced, the unfairness. We've seen families that have been torn apart, and we've seen people with no criminal record who are being accused of being threats to the United States. And that's why this bill by Senator Cortez Masto is so timely, so critical, and so important for us. Let me also add, and we all share the feeling too, about 750,000 DACA dreamers who are out there with the legal permission of the United States government through President Obama's executive order, going to school, living, working without fear of deportation. We worry about them on a daily basis, and we are still waiting for clarity from the Trump administration about their status and their future. That is another concern that we have. But today we focus on this interior document and the potential that it has to destroy and disrupt and divide so many innocent families. The vast majority of immigrants in our country are law-abiding, with strong values and roots in our country. Immigrant families around the country are rightly concerned that this executive order is laying the groundwork for mass deportations that will tear apart hardworking families who work hard, make their community stronger, and only want nothing more than to pursue the American dream. I'm the ranking Democrat on the Senate's Immigration Subcommittee. Last week, I called on the chairman of that subcommittee, John Cornyn of Texas, to hold hearings on this mass deportation order, as well as the president's executive order to ban refugees and Muslims from this country, as well as his order to build a $21 billion wall at the expense of American taxpayers. Congress has a responsibility as an independent branch of the federal government to stand up and make clear we will not be intimidated by the heavy-handed tactics which divide families and do not make America any safer. It's my honor to defer to my colleague from Hawaii. Aloha, Senator Hirano.
Thank you very much. Good morning and aloha, everyone. I'm really proud to join Senator Cortez Masto in her first bill introduced in the U.S. Senate. Most of us are not far from our immigrant roots, and for myself, I am an immigrant. I am living the American dream, where my mother brought me to this country as a single parent and raised 3 children by herself. So the continuing attacks by President Trump on immigrants in this country are particularly painful and troubling to me. Over the weekend, one of President Trump's advisors was trying to convince the American people that the president had, and I quote, accomplished more in just a few weeks than many presidents do in an entire administration, end quote. This statement is, of course, absolutely ridiculous. I'd say more alternative facts from this administration. I'd argue that President Trump has done more harm to America in just a few weeks than most presidents do in the entirety of their terms. He's already attacked the administration with an education secretary who does not believe in public education, a health and human services secretary who wants to dismantle Medicare, and a treasury secretary who profited during the worst abuses of the financial crisis. He's tried to ban Muslims from entering the United States solely because of their religion. And now, instead of pursuing consensus on a comprehensive immigration bill, President Trump has launched a new assault on immigrants and their families. The stories we've all seen and heard over the past week have been heartbreaking. Families are being torn apart. Lives are being destroyed. The vast majority of those arrested are not violent criminals. They are people who have contributed to their communities for decades. We can trace this new assault directly to President Trump's executive order on so-called interior safety. And it fulfills one of his own campaign promises, which, of course, all of us take the position that those promises should never have been made because of the damage that it does to millions of people in our country. We are only beginning to feel the impact of this executive order, but it's already been devastating. Nearly 700 people have been arrested in raids across the country, including a dreamer in Seattle. This is only a taste of what's to come, and the American people should be infuriated. I am, because as I mentioned, this is personal to me. So, waves of immigrants have played a major role in shaping my home state of Hawaii. And we need to band together to resist this executive order now. We need to stand up whenever our president, this president, tries to divide our country and target minority groups for discriminatory treatment. And if we don't stand up, as we are doing on a regular basis these days, then we are complicit in what follows. So I'm glad to stand here with my colleagues in solidarity with the people of America. And I want to reiterate that this sweeping order is so sweeping that it will encompass some 8 million of the 11 million undocumented people in our country. And this order is spreading fear throughout our communities. It is spreading fear. So this executive order is not only unworkable in that it encompasses 8 million people for potential deportation, but it is inhumane. So thank you very much for being here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Greisa Martinez Rosas. I serve as the Advocacy Director for United We Dream. I am undocumented, unafraid, and here to stay. As United We Dream, we are proud and thankful to the people that are with us today, not only for their support for immigrant youth, but for the support of people like my mother, Elia Rosas, who is undocumented and in Texas, and doesn't know what's going to happen to our family in the next couple of years. You know, Donald Trump's election has meant fear and uncertainty for communities like mine, And when he issued the executive order, basically putting a blanket criminal label on people that are part of United We Dream, people like myself, we took up in arms and we decided with the people next to me to ensure that we were fighting back against the narrative that Donald Trump wants to create about myself and about 11 million people in this country. Today, Daniel sits behind bars apart from his children because of a draconian measure by this president. And ICE is lying about why they have him there. Donald Trump has meant that there is insecurity in our community. And let me be clear, no one is safe under Trump's America. But the other thing that must be clear is that immigrant communities are ready to fight back. We are ready to set the record straight about who we are and what we're about, that we are about families and that we're about our children. And today we stand here proudly rescinding back, pushing back on his executive order. We believe that it's happening here in the House of Congress. It's happening in the streets. We all saw people come out in support of immigrants. People are joining the United We Dream Here to Stay network and wanting to figure out how to best move forward in this moment. I know that this moment might seem so bleak for a lot of us, that there are times where we might feel powerless to be able to fight back in this moment. But I will tell you that I'm reminded of my story when my father and I and my mother crossed the Rio Grande, and I felt the icy waters on my skin, and I didn't know whether I was gonna survive. This moment reminds me of that. And guess what? I made it. 11 million of us made it. We have built homes here with our children. We have created political power. We will test that political power and strengthen it. And because we know that we are here grounded in our children and our love. Esta mañana Daniel Ramírez está separado de su hijo por las órdenes ejecutivas de Donald Trump. Él, en la América de Donald Trump, significa que nadie, ni siquiera yo, ni mi mamá, ni siquiera gente que tiene DACA, está seguro en este momento. Yo sé que la comunidad se va a unir y vamos a luchar, porque no vamos a dejar a Donald Trump que nos mande otra vez al lugar donde nos estamos escondiendo. No vamos a dejar que Donald Trump nos cambie la vida. Vamos a seguir luchando. So today I'm proud to stand with the men and women here. Senator Durbin has been such a partner to United We Dream and immigrant youth all across the country, declaring that immigrants are here to stay. They will continue to do everything in our power to push back against Donald Trump, and that we will prevail. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Clarissa Martinez. I am part of the National Council of La Raza family, which includes nearly 300 community-based organizations over the country who together serve millions of Americans and immigrants every year. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about millions of American families. That is who is under siege right now as a result of the scorched earth approach that this administration is pursuing. That is why we stand here proudly with Senator Cortez Masto, Senator Durbin, Senator Hirono, and their Senate co-sponsors on this bill to rescind the Interior enforcement order that this administration put out. This scorched earth approach is nothing but a hoax on taxpayers. It undermines security, it destroys families, it destabilizes local economies, and it bullies cities and local jurisdictions who are refusing to engage in the indiscriminate persecution of immigrants just for the act of being immigrant. That's what this is about. They're invoking criminality many times solely based on immigration status and not actions that pose a threat to national security of community safety. And by invoking that, Trump is trying to unleash a deportation force that is intended to terrorize immigrants and their U.S. citizen family members. That's what this is about. From an immigration policy perspective, this is not just as irresponsible as the $25 billion wall and mounting cost, but it is corrosive and destructive. We have seen this before. when immigration enforcement rejects prioritizing national security and community safety, moms and dads who pose no threat to anyone become the easy targets. And this serves no one, and it makes no one any safer. And Mr. Trump and Mr. Bannon also know that this order goes actually further. So not only are we seeing this deportation force start circling around churches, schools, courthouses, they seem intent on crossing the line of decency in the pursuit of chaos and fear. But it does not even end there. This is an opening to the intimidation of anyone in our country who is perceived to be an immigrant because of the color of their skin or their accent. The administration's intent here is to create a national show me your papers environment. And guess which Americans are going to be asked to show their papers? We have already seen several cases of this in the current raids that happened last week. And while for some the violation of rights and values of show me your paper policies may seem acceptable collateral damage, to the nation's Hispanic community, nearly 8 out of 10 are United States citizens. This is not collateral at all. This executive order, it's nothing but a hoax. It's misguided priorities. It's just the continuation of Coliseum politics. And its intent is to spread chaos and fear. And we stand here proudly to reject those kinds of policies. And we demand that the administration is serious, that they should put some real solutions on the table rather than try to pit Americans against each other and destroy families. And thank you to the senators here for taking this step forward and for partnering together to bring light to this situation. Thank you very much.
My name is Frank Sherry. I'm the Executive Director of America's Voice, an immigrant advocacy group based here in Washington, D.C. Obviously, we're thrilled to stand here with these champions who are fighting for not only immigrants, but fighting for who we are as a country. You know, I've been in this debate a long time. It's often framed as a binary choice. Do you want us to be a nation of immigrants, or do you want us to be a nation of laws? And what these senators have consistently done throughout their careers, and those like Senator Durbin, who have been such a champion for so long, the answer to that question is yes. We want to be a nation of immigrants, and we want to be a nation of laws. That is why they have fought so long and hard for comprehensive immigration reform, which finds the balance, integrates lawfulness and immigration in a way that moves our country forward. Senator Durbin often says that immigration is a defining feature of our past and our present, and it should be a defining feature of our future. And that's what's at risk now, because what's happened with the Trump administration is they've come in and they've taken a sledgehammer to the idea of a balanced approach to being a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws. They want to enforce the laws so aggressively that they literally put 11 million people in the crosshairs. People who, most of whom have been here many years, a third of whom are homeowners, kids who go to college, kids who are in med school, DACA recipients, just ordinary American families, for whom 80% of the American people believe should have a path to legal status and have a chance to be full Americans, as part of a reform in which, yes, we do reduce illegal immigration. It's not either or, it's both and. And so I'm somewhat stunned that the Trump administration has come in and is quite frankly distorting the idea of being a nation of laws in such a way that it undermines respect for the law. If we get the balance right, law-abiding families will be able to make a fuller contribution to America. But this is not right. When we're going after men who come out of a hypothermia shelter in Alexandria, when a woman who gets turned in by her abuser and picked up outside of a courthouse, when a dreamer happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and sits in detention today. You know, the ICE fact sheet that just came out about who was picked up after all their talk of murderers and sex offenders, by far the two largest categories of the 683 people that have been picked up are DUI and traffic offenses. So let's just be clear that there's a public relations strategy to try to criminalize the entire undocumented community to justify a very aggressive mass deportation strategy. That's not rhetoric, that's what's happening. And so we're just so proud that these senators have stood up and said, let's rescind this executive order. It's a simple one-page bill. It's one I think the Republicans can actually wrap their arms around because they don't like big bills. Apparently it's too hard to read those. Senator Cortez Masto has really figured out how to get it right. One paragraph, rescind the executive order, and we're proud to support it. Thank you.
So let me just say thank you to my colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the friends who have joined us today, and thank you for sharing your story and having your voice being heard. I'm happy to open this up for a couple of questions, and then we need to take off. Yeah.
Yes, I'm Maria Peña with La Opinión, and thank you for doing this. So I have two related questions. One is, given that you are in the minority, what are the chances of this bill actually getting through in both chambers of Congress? And on the related question, they without immigrants, given that immigrants are, I forgot what the percentage is for the labor force. I was wondering what impact this particular day of protest will be, and what can the private sector do to support immigrants given their contributions to the economy?
I'll take a couple of questions and then have my colleagues open up. Let me say, for me, this is about working across the aisle, working with all of my colleagues, about how we continue to protect the families in our communities. This is happening in every single community. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it is happening to your community members, and it is time to start fighting for them. And for me, it is building that relationships with my colleagues to figure out how we find common sense solutions to addressing this issue, which to me is not issuing this particular order, but fixing our broken immigration system, passing a comprehensive immigration reform law that addresses all of these issues without preying upon members of our community and instilling fear that somehow their offices, their workplaces, their homes are going to be raided, and kids having concerns that if they leave the house and they come home, their parents may not be there. That's not the answer to fixing our broken immigration system. And then today, I am excited about what I see as, and I know in my own state, our chambers, our businesses support our immigrant community. They support passing comprehensive immigration reform. They know, and I've just showed you the statistics, if we were just to pass it, it would reduce our deficit by $1 trillion. It would increase the GDP by over $800 billion. We know they are not only working in our communities, but they're contributing to our communities. And we will see that today as the rest of the day plays out across the country.
What we're seeing is growing awareness and activism on a number of issues, including on immigration all across the country. So that gives me hope. And also the fact that the U.S. Senate passed a comprehensive immigration bill not too long ago under the tremendous leadership of my colleague right here, Senator Durbin. He was one of the authors of the comprehensive immigration bill. So as these kinds of sweeping executive orders continue to flow out of this White House, I think that there will just be a growing drumbeat of support for what we're doing today.
I think you asked the fundamental question. In politics, how do you overcome fear and hate? My answer is with 6 words. Let me tell you a story. And that's what we need to do. We need to tell the story about that woman who is pushing the cart outside your motel room who is going to clean up after you leave. We need to tell the story about that young man who just cleared your table after dinner. We need to tell the story about who's watching your grandmother in the nursing home each day as you think about her and their lives. And we have to tell the stories of families that are sadly going to be divided by this terrible executive order. To convince America that this is an unfair way to deal with a serious issue, keeping America safe. We can keep our country safe, and we can also honor our values when it comes to immigration. This day, where immigrants across this country are not coming to work, is a demonstration of their importance to our economy, is a big first step, but it's only a first step. We need to have pastors and priests and rabbis and imams standing up as well and talking about people in the community, people in the congregations who are also affected by these decisions. We have to make it personal. We have to tell the stories.
I would add on this particular thing is that this poses a choice for Republicans. Whether this executive order, this bill moves forward, if it does not, it means that they're espousing Trump's executive order. They are owning everything that happens to Daniel. They're owning everything that happens to people like my mother, and they will be the ones held responsible. So to Speaker Ryan and to Mr. McConnell, we say, what will you do about this? There's still a question about what will happen to people like myself on DACA, what will happen to people like my mother. And so for us, this is not just a symbolic piece. It is a choice that Republicans will have to make. If this bill does not move forward, then that means that they're owning Trump's executive orders.
All right, one more question, and then we've got to get back. Yes.
I was wondering if you could explain what power Congress has in this type of bill to set discretion and priorities for the president. If rescinding this order would make it so that they couldn't have those same types of priorities.
No, rescinding this order is taking back our concerns with the priorities that were set for the executive branch agencies. And it would just return it to status quo, the way it was before, which is, I know working with the ICE and law enforcement in my community, they're prioritizing those individuals who are a threat to our safety in our community, violent criminals, and individuals that pose that threat, whether it's to national security or threat to our communities. You've heard the conversation here. Somebody who is going to work is not a threat to our community. And so that to me is it's going to return it to the status quo where it should be. Thank you, everyone.
Good job. Thank you so much for your leadership. This is a very simple.